I've always been drawn to loneliness, but in those moments when autumn turned smoothly into winter and the air turned cold and piercing, I couldn't help but feel like I couldn't avoid bumping into the people I'd decided to leave behind. At the end of the year, it became especially difficult for me, and every time I picked up a cold cup of coffee, sipped it, and looked at the screen of my smartphone, which had 7 missed calls from my mother, I wanted to get away from obsessive thoughts as quickly as possible. Of course, Mom always called at the moment when I had a lot of things to do, when I was trying to figure out projects at work, when deadlines threatened to close all doors in front of me. Working as a copywriter in an advertising agency, I finally achieved the level of independence I had been waiting for so long. And although the job was stressful, it was satisfying. Being able to control my time was a luxury I couldn't get enough of. When you have lived almost your entire life with your family, observing their claims and expectations, then such a luxury as freedom becomes priceless. But even at times like this, when I thought I could finally be myself, my mother invaded this world over and over again, which I was diligently trying to escape. And before we continue, write in the comments from which country and from which city you are watching this video. We are very interested to know from which corner of the planet our video is being watched. Enjoy watching. This time, I didn't dare answer the phone right away. It was late, so I decided I needed to talk to her as soon as possible, although I knew that every such conversation would take a lot out of me. I remember how during the last Christmas, when everyone was supposed to be in one rush, at some point I realized that holiday was just an empty word. All the adults were laughing, having fun, sharing bottles of wine, and I was the only one who had to take care of the kids. The task was assigned to me for a reason, but by right of the eldest. My family took it for granted, and no one, including my mother, thought about how it might affect me. But I've learned not to complain. I used to accept it as my responsibility, as my role in this picture. When I finally answered the phone, there was already the same note of mild reproach in my mother's voice. She always spoke as if I had to react immediately. "You finally picked up the phone," she said, as if it was a feat that I decided to talk to her at all. I immediately realized that the conversation would not go without another portion of reproaches, because it was their favorite activity. "I've called you several times," she continued, not even giving me a chance to get in a word. "I was at work," I replied, but I didn't really notice all the calls until after I finished my shift. But as usual, I hesitated to explain the details to her. "What are your plans for Christmas?" Mom asked with a special urgency in her voice that I didn't want to give into. Why is she asking this question again? What does she want from me again? But I didn't answer right away, considering how best to act so as not to incur new claims. After all, I had been living my life for a long time. I had built my own world, and I wasn't going to destroy it in order to feel like a little girl again, who should do everything as her mother says. "I plan to go to the family home, as always," I said, although in fact this year I was completely unsure of my plans. There was a pause in response. I could hear her thinking about what to say next, and immediately I felt more and more tension coming over me. And so, as always, she began to change the rules of the game. "Well, this year everything is going to be a little different," Mom said, and I felt an unpleasant feeling come over my head. "What do you mean?" I asked, exposing myself to her playful and terrifying game in which there were no winners. "Aunt Sandra came up with a great idea," she continued, and I was ready to see where everything was going. "We are all adults. We go on a Caribbean cruise from Christmas to New Year." I felt my thoughts abruptly stop, and something went cold inside. Caribbean cruise. It was something out of the ordinary, and of course I wasn't included in those plans. "Are you serious?" I couldn't help myself, but she was already hurrying on before I could get a word in. "Not so great?" she asked with a smirk in her voice, but that only made the situation worse. I checked my thoughts and said, "But you didn't consult me about that." And that's when it hit me. Mom became slightly silent, and I realized that I had to deal with this, with the fact that her expectations were always more important than anything else. That evening, when my words went into the void, leaving only a residual chill in my heart, I still could not figure out if they had reached my mother. I was sitting in my small apartment, trying to make myself comfortable in my space, but the feeling of anxiety wouldn't leave me. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, and every time I saw my mother's or father's name on the screen, I ruthlessly sent their calls to voicemail. Then I received a short message from Uncle Richard. "Rebecca, are you thinking about your family?" I grinned, but that grin was more bitterness than joy. In my family, thinking about family has always meant one thing: sacrificing oneself for the fulfillment of other people's desires and needs. I've probably been loyal to them for too long to understand it so clearly. Over the years, I have never learned to be myself because it has always been easier for me to adapt to the demands of others. On the couch, in my hiding place from the outside world, I looked at the phone screen, feeling sadness mixed with irritation. I didn't know what to do with this condition, so I decided to dial Gina's number. She was the kind of person I could talk to openly without fear of being judged. Gina knew all the details of my family, all those painful moments that I was forced to go through because of their constant expectations. She picked up the phone almost immediately. "Are they trying to make you look after the kids again?" "What is it?" she asked, as bluntly as ever. "Yes, but this time it's different." I said no. "I no longer have to agree with what they decide for me for my own good," I replied, feeling something inside me release the weight that I had been carrying for so long. "You've always been too accommodating with them," Gina remarked, and there was a gentle but firm confidence in her voice. "You have the right to have time for yourself, but it seems they haven't given up yet." I knew Gina was right, but still their pressure was only getting greater every day. And then the call came again, this time from my father. I closed my eyes and made a decision. I had to answer. "Dad," I said, not waiting for his greeting. "My answer hasn't changed." "Rebecca?" My father's voice was soft, calm, even somewhat lulling. "We just want you to show some compassion for the family." I felt something tighten in my chest, but I didn't let myself give up. I could no longer be the one who always succumbed to these requests, this emotional manipulation that shrouded all my decisions like a fog. "I lack compassion when you don't respect my time or my plans," I replied firmly but with restraint, trying to remain calm despite the surge of emotions. "Okay, let's spend this year apart," my father said. "But could you come just for Christmas morning? The kids really want to see you." I thought about it. This suggestion sounded reasonable. There were no hidden tricks in it. My children, as they always liked to say, were more important to him than anything else in the world, and perhaps it was an attempt to keep in touch after all. I felt something in my heart gently give in, but I decided that my conditions should remain unchanged. "Okay, I'm only coming for Christmas morning, but stop asking me to look after the kids," I said, and I could hear the relief in my father's voice. "Thank you," he said, and without waiting for his reply, I hung up. I sat in silence, feeling the tension ease a little, but at the same time, I was strangely uneasy. It was too easy, too fast, as if I had just been thrown off my shoulders. Did my words really reach him? I could have doubted the sincerity of this decision, but I decided not to worry. I had clearly defined my boundaries, and that was enough. The weeks before Christmas passed for me in a kind of half-asleep state. I kept communication with my family to a minimum, avoiding unnecessary conversations and meetings. The only confirmation that I was still a part of their lives were text messages from my parents. There were no more requests or instructions in these messages, only dry phrases that did not contain any hint of manipulation. It was a new stage, and I was ready to accept it, even with caution. On Christmas Eve, before going to bed, I texted my parents, "I'll be there around 11 a.m. The reply came quickly, and it was a message from my mother. "Understood, Rebecca. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow." I smiled, even though I understood that relations with my family had always been difficult. Time did not erase their sharp edges, but I was ready for reconciliation in the spirit of Christmas, keeping my boundaries, and that was important to me. The next morning, I woke up early with a slight anxiety in my heart, as if something invisible was hanging in the air. I carefully packed the gifts and loaded them into the car. I chose the gifts for the children with special care. Nicole got a set of the latest youth novels that she wanted so much. Chris got a new Lego set, and for Alex, I chose a stuffed toy that he had been dreaming about for a long time. On the way to my parents' house, I thought that maybe Christmas could be the beginning of something new for me and my family. I was sitting on a kitchen chair, clutching the phone in my hand so that my fingers turned white, feeling the blood pounding in my temples, filling my head with a weight of anger and despair. I was shaking, from anger, from impotence, from the realization that I had been betrayed in the most brazen and vile way, that all my words, all my boundaries had been ignored, that I had been used as a convenient tool, completely disregarding my desires. I closed my eyes, trying to deal with the storm of emotions, and took a deep breath. They're still at the airport. This was my chance. I stood up slowly, feeling my legs wobble slightly from the adrenaline rush. I forced myself to take a few deep breaths before leaving the kitchen. In the living room, the children were already enthusiastically unwrapping presents, laughing and chatting among themselves, as if nothing unusual had happened. They were too young to understand the depth of the meanness committed by their parents, and I couldn't get mad at them. They were innocent. Their joy was genuine, but I was an adult, and at that moment I was responsible for what would happen next. "Are you okay?" Nicole asked, looking up at me with big, serious eyes. "Yes, I'm fine," I replied, softening my voice. "I just talked to your grandmother. They'll be back soon." "Really?" Chris asked, looking at me with slight concern. "Really?" I nodded, deciding that this lie was necessary right now. "In the meantime, let's collect the toys and see what else you got." It distracted them. The children were immersed in their toys again, and I, glancing at the clock, took a few quick steps to the hallway, grabbed my bag, and started checking if I had everything I needed: documents, keys, phone, wallet. I didn't know how it would end, but I knew for sure that I wasn't going to wait and let them do whatever they wanted with me. The minutes dragged by painfully slowly. I couldn't sit still. I walked around the room, trying not to look at the children, because every time I saw their happy faces, my heart ached. They have no place in this chaos. They should not suffer because of their parents' irresponsibility. I forced myself to focus on time. The clock showed 11:27. Half an hour had passed. They had to make a decision. I called my mother again. She answered almost immediately, her voice agitated, but still with that note of authority that I couldn't stand. "Rebecca, we're trying to figure something out. You have 30 minutes left," I said calmly but firmly. "If you are not back at the house by 12 I will go to the police. But you do understand that we can't do this so quickly. I won't listen to anything else. It's your choice." I've dropped the call. I knew I had done the right thing, but everything inside was shaking. By 11:50, I started packing the kids' things. I didn't want to scare them. I didn't want them to feel like something was wrong, but I couldn't wait any longer. "Where are we going?" Alex asked as I was buttoning his jacket. "We're just going for a little car ride," I smiled, trying to sound as casual as possible. But before I could open the doorbell rang. I opened it. My mother stood in the doorway, out of breath, with disheveled hair, and my father loomed behind her, looking tired and angry. I crossed my arms over my chest, not letting my emotions get the better of me. "You're back." "Rebecca, you weren't really going to," my mother began, but I interrupted her. "I was going to. And if you had been even a minute late, I would have already been on the road with the kids." Mom turned pale. My father was silent, but in his eyes I saw not only fatigue, but also something like respect. "I'm sorry," she muttered. I looked at her for a long time, studying her. I wanted to believe that she was truly remorseful, but I knew her too well. It was a regret for a disrupted vacation, not a betrayal. "Go away," I said in a flat voice. "I don't want to see you." "Rebecca," her mother began again, but her father put his hand on her shoulder. "Give her time," he said softly. I didn't let myself cry until they were gone. I didn't let myself snap until I closed the door. I didn't let myself fall to my knees while the kids were around. But something has changed inside me. Forever. I stared at the screen, feeling my heart beating so hard in my chest that it seemed to echo in the silence of the apartment. My fingers were still shaking after I clicked publish. I've never brought family disagreements out in public before, and I've never allowed myself to tell others about what happened behind the closed doors of the house in which I was raised. But today was different. Today I broke the silence because I could no longer allow them to distort reality, to turn me into a monster who allegedly rejected my family on a sacred holiday. It took several minutes before the first reactions appeared. Likes, comments, reposts. Some people supported me, others were surprised, some were perplexed, and some openly condemned me. I saw familiar surnames among the commentators. Family friends, distant relatives, old acquaintances of parents who, not knowing the whole picture, were in a hurry to take their side. Isn't family more important than personal ambitions? They raised me, and in the end, such a betrayal. Rebecca, you could have shown sympathy, they're just kids. I gritted my teeth, feeling my insides turn over. Of course, they don't know the whole truth. They see only my mother's complaint, only her wounded emotions, her artfully written words that make me a heartless person. But soon other voices began to appear among the comments, those who really knew me, those who had seen my many years of sacrifice. Rebecca doesn't have to be a babysitter just because she doesn't have children of her own. Parents should have agreed in advance, and not to frame their adult child. Manipulation and coercion is not what is called caring for a family. The support of friends and strangers made me take a deep breath. I wasn't alone in this. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't selfish, as my mother tried to portray me, but I knew that this silence wouldn't last long. And sure enough, half an hour later, the phone exploded with calls. Mom, Dad, Aunt Sandra. Even Uncle Richard, who usually tried to stay away, sent a short message. Rebecca, this is too much. Call me. I ignored the calls, but a minute later I received another message, this time from my father. Delete it, right now. I stared at the screen, feeling the anger boil up inside me again. Delete it? To let them rule my life again? To silently accept all their decisions that they've been forcing on me for years? No. The phone rang again. Mom. I bit my lip and answered anyway. Have you lost your mind? She hissed without even saying hello. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've thrown the dirt out for all to see. It's a shame. Shame? I grinned, clutching the phone tighter. It's a shame to leave your children and go on vacation, leaving them with a man who clearly said no. Shame is not respecting the boundaries of another adult. The shame is what you did to me. We were just counting on your help. No. You expected me to swallow this in silence, as I have done for all 28 years of my life. But I'm not the same anymore, Mom. I won't let you use me. There was a heavy pause on the other side, and then Mom spoke in a completely different tone. Soft, offended, the one she used when she wanted to make me feel guilty. Rebecca, I didn't mean to. I just thought you wouldn't leave us at a time like this. I won't leave? I shuddered, feeling the words stick in my throat. Can you hear me at all? You left the children. You're gone. You didn't think about the consequences. And now that I've told the truth, do you want to make me feel guilty again? Baby, please, let's not fight. Let's just delete this post and everything will be forgotten. No, Mom, I won't delete it. I heard her sigh heavily. Do you understand that now? Now everything will be different. Yes, I understand. I heard her sob on the other end of the line, but she didn't say anything else. She just silently passed out. I put the phone down on the table and took a deep breath. What now? Now my family will consider me a traitor. Now they will whisper behind my back, tell relatives and friends about how I behaved terribly. Now, maybe our relationship will never be the same. But maybe it's even for the best. I'm not their toy anymore. Not their handy tool, not a free babysitter. I am me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like it really mattered. I stared at the screen of my phone, feeling a strange, almost paralyzing wave of emotions rising inside. My mother, my stubborn, unbending mother, who was always sure she was right, who never admitted mistakes, who could convince anyone of anything, now publicly wrote that she was wrong. I read her words over and over again, as if I couldn't believe my eyes, feeling something heavy, warm, almost painful spreading in my chest. It couldn't be true. Did all this really happen? Did she really realize how terrible she had done? I took a deep breath, forcing myself not to jump to conclusions, not to give in to surging feelings, not to allow myself to hope too early. I knew my mother. She could apologize if she felt it would be good for her. This post could have been just another attempt to smooth things over, shift responsibility, and make everything look like a small family misunderstanding that wasn't worth paying attention to. And yet, I felt that there was something real in this apology, even if only a little. My phone vibrated again. Messages, comments, mentions. Everything merged into one endless stream. I didn't know what to do. Should I reply? Keep quiet? Should I call her? Instead of reacting immediately, I decided to give myself a few minutes to process what had just happened. Soon there was a call from Gina. "Did you see that?" "What is it?" she asked without preamble, and I could hear the genuine shock in her voice. "Yes, I'm just shocked. Your mother, did she really write that? Publicly?" "It looks like it," I muttered, feeling my thoughts get confused. "What are you going to do?" I stopped talking. To be honest, I had no idea. I do not know. I didn't expect her to break down so quickly. "Do you think she's sincere?" "That's what I don't know." Gina sighed. "You can trust her, or you can leave it as it is. You don't owe anyone anything, Rebecca. This is your life, your boundaries. If you feel like you're not ready to forgive yet, you don't have to do it just because she apologized in public." I knew she was right. "I'll think about it." "Thank you, Gina." "You're welcome." We said goodbye, and I was left alone with my thoughts again. Social media continued to seethe. Dozens of messages appeared in the comments to my mother's post. Someone praised her for her courage to admit a mistake. Someone doubted her sincerity, and someone still accused me of making my family look bad. I saw familiar names: Grandma Barbara, my Grandpa Frank. They wrote that they were proud of me, that they were glad that I was finally able to stand up for myself. And then I decided. I opened Facebook again and started writing. "I'm grateful to everyone who supported me in this situation. It was a difficult day, and I did not expect that my personal decision to declare my borders would find such a response from so many people. I've always believed that family is about love and respect, but it's only now that I realize that respect should be mutual." My mother apologized. It means a lot to me. But apologies are not the final point, but only the beginning of a long journey. Trust is not restored in a single post on social media. It takes time. I'm not angry. I'm just tired of being the kind of person who is used and taken for granted. I hope that this story will serve as a lesson not only for me, but also for anyone who has ever encountered such a thing. We don't have to sacrifice ourselves for someone else's comfort. Thank you all for your support. I reread what I wrote. Yes, these were my thoughts, honest, without unnecessary emotions, without a desire for revenge or to seek recognition. My fingers were shaking again when I clicked publish. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was sitting in my apartment staring at the phone screen, feeling a dull rage boiling inside me, mixed with despair and fatigue. They didn't just misunderstand. They didn't just ignore everything that happened. They decided to go on the attack, make me look like a monster, making themselves victims. My parents, aunt and uncle, the people who used me for years, manipulated me, forced me to obey their will, now openly threw mud at me, twisted facts, distorted reality so that I looked ungrateful, moody, vindictive. I reread their posts again. What a shame to sue a family over such a small thing. Rebecca had completely lost touch with reality. We only asked her to help us, and now she's making monsters out of us. This is the worst Christmas of our lives. We tried to fix the situation, but it seems she doesn't want to make contact. Sometimes you just have to admit that your child is not the person you raised. I never thought that the person I thought was my own would be so cruel. At what point did our Rebecca become like this? I felt my hands shaking and I clenched my teeth, forcing myself not to react impulsively. I couldn't let them drag me into this dirty game. Taking a deep breath, I picked up the phone and dialed Grandpa Frank's number. He answered almost immediately. "Rebecca, I've been waiting for your call." I closed my eyes, feeling a lump rise in my throat for a moment. "Did you see that?" My voice was strained, but I tried to control myself. I saw it. He sighed heavily. This is unacceptable. They didn't just misunderstand, they decided to destroy you publicly. Your grandmother is furious. She hasn't talked to them since morning. I've been trying to call your dad, but he's not answering. I gripped the phone tighter. Grandfather? I do not know what to do. They just won't stop. You have to go all the way, Rebecca. I held my breath. Do you really think so? They think you'll be scared, that you'll break down under the pressure. But if you give in now, it means they've won. They will never change unless they face the consequences of their actions. I ran my hand over my face, feeling a wave of fatigue wash over me. I don't want to waste my life on this, Grandpa. I just want them to leave me alone. Then you need to get them to do it. I knew he was right. After the call, I didn't waste any time and contacted Vanessa Gale again. They continue to publicly slander me, I told the lawyer, sending her screenshots of my parents', aunts', and uncles' posts. They call me ungrateful, emotionally unstable, and claim that I falsified history. They do it intentionally. Vanessa looked through all the materials carefully before answering. This is already going beyond the usual family disputes. We are dealing with deliberate defamation aimed at undermining your reputation. I recommend filing a lawsuit for the protection of honor and dignity. Do you think this is necessary? Rebecca, let's be honest. They won't stop on their own. They want to put pressure on you, break you, force you to retreat. Now you have two options. Either you let them continue to make a monster out of you, or you protect yourself. I closed my eyes, realizing that I had already made a choice. Good, file a lawsuit. I will prepare the documents. You should temporarily turn off social media to avoid putting yourself under even more stress. I nodded even though she couldn't see it and hung up. Now everything is official. When I turned off notifications on my phone, I felt something strange. It wasn't anger, not fear. It was a relief. A few days passed and news of my lawsuit began to spread. The family was furious. Mom tried to call me again, but I didn't pick up the phone anymore. But my father called me. You really did it. His voice was hollow, full of tension. Yes, I really did it. Do you understand that there is no turning back now? I grinned, even though something was still hurting inside. There was no turning back from the moment you left the children and flew away on vacation, knowing that I refused to babysit them. He was silent for a few seconds. Do you hate us? No, Dad. I just won't let you use me anymore. He sighed heavily. Well, then we'll meet in court. I heard him switch off. I slowly put the phone down on the table, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath. Everything has changed. Forever. I stood on the steps of the courthouse, breathing in the cold morning air, feeling two completely opposite feelings intertwine in my chest. Heaviness and relief. It's all over. The judge ruled in my favor, set boundaries that my family had refused to recognize for years, silenced them when they would prefer to continue spreading lies. But at what cost? I felt like a winner, but at the same time, it was empty inside, as if I had just burned the bridge that connected me to the past, and now only smoldering coals remained of it. My grandparents were standing next to me, the only family members who unconditionally supported me from the very beginning. Grandpa squeezed my shoulder as a sign of support. You did the right thing, Rebecca, he said, his voice full of firm confidence. Time can heal a lot, but you must always remember that no one has the right to deprive you of dignity. I nodded, but deep down, it was hard for me to believe that time would really make a difference. Grandma gently took my hand, her eyes filled with concern and concern. We know how hard it is for you right now, honey, she said softly, but we're proud of you. You're the first one in the family who dared to say no. I smiled weakly. I didn't want it to go that far. It's not your fault, Grandpa interrupted. They made their choice. They themselves led to this ending. Now they will have to live with its consequences. I knew he was right. I knew this from the very beginning, but for some reason, the realization did not bring joy. It's been a few weeks. I returned to my usual life, but it was no longer the same. I felt like I had lost something important, but at the same time gained something more valuable: freedom. My parents didn't try to contact me anymore. Aunt Sandra and Uncle Richard also fell silent. Their social networks, once full of accusations and innuendos in my direction, have now been erased or overflowing with neutral, harmless posts, as if nothing had happened. But I knew what had happened, and I knew it had changed us all. Despite this, I did not stop communicating with Nicole, Chris, and Alex. I didn't want them to suffer because of adults. I didn't want them to think that I had abandoned them. We corresponded, called each other sometimes, and I could see that they were still reaching out to me. They were children and could not fully understand the depth of the conflict, but their words always sounded sincere. One day I received a message from Nicole. "I miss you, Aunt Becca. I know that adults are angry, but you won't forget about us, will you?" I felt a lump rise in my throat. "Of course not, honey. You can always text or call me," she replied almost immediately. "Then when will I see you?" I looked at the screen, feeling my heart clench with pain. I didn't know the answer. In the evening, the bell rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something about it seemed vaguely familiar to me. I hesitated, but eventually I answered. "Rebecca," my father's voice rang out. I froze. "How long has it been since our last conversation? 2 months? 3? He sounded tired, and his voice was devoid of the anger it had been before. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He paused. "I just wanted to know how you were." I clutched the phone in my hand. "I'm fine." "That's good." Another pause. "Why are you calling, Dad?" "I do not know." He sighed heavily. "I just wanted to talk. I wanted to say." He stammered, and I suddenly realized what he was trying to say. "Apologies." But the words stuck in his throat. "I understand," I said softly. We were both silent. I didn't know what would happen next. Probably nothing. He probably won't call again. Perhaps this rift between us will never heal. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't afraid of it anymore. As Grandpa said, time can heal a lot. But most importantly, I finally healed myself. Years have passed and I hardly thought about them. Not because I forgot, not because I forgave, but because I learned to live without their voices in my head, without their expectations, without their manipulations, without that fog of guilt that has enveloped me since childhood. They no longer defined my life. I was no longer afraid of the word no. The decision to break up with my family was not easy for me, but it was inevitable. Even after the trial, even after all the attempts by my mother and father to regain control over me, I knew that if I let them get close again, everything would start all over again. They will never change. Their apologies were forced, their defeat was temporary, and if I gave up, they would immediately find a way to lock me back into a cage of duty and obligations. I chose freedom. The trial changed not only my life, but also theirs. After the verdict, the world they had so carefully built around themselves began to crumble. My father, James, who prided himself on his impeccable reputation in the company all his life, turned out to be an outcast. His colleagues no longer looked at him with respect. His authority was undermined, and trust was lost. He was forced to take early retirement, and after a few months he disappeared from the business environment altogether, as if he had never existed. My mother, Debbie, lost everything she valued so much: respect in society, influence, status. She was expelled from the parents' committee, she was ignored, and those who once flatteringly called her a friend turned away from her. People didn't want to deal with her, because now she was not a strict but respected mother, but a woman who manipulated her own daughter, bullied her on social media, and lost the court. Aunt Sandra and Uncle Richard, who had counted on the support of their friends and clients all their lives, saw their world narrowing. People stopped coming into their store, financial difficulties increased, bills came one after another, and soon they could not pay the mortgage. The store had to be closed. They sold the house and moved to a cheap apartment in the suburbs, far from the life they were used to. The irony was that they had created their own destiny. I wasn't taking revenge. I wasn't trying to destroy them. They did it with their own hands, with their own words, with their own attitude. I didn't distance myself from everyone. Grandma and Grandpa remained close people to me, the ones who supported me when it was most important. I often visited them, especially after Grandfather's health began to deteriorate. We had tea on his veranda as we used to when we were kids, and we talked about life, books, and people, and he always said, "You made the right choice, Rebecca. They just reap what they sow." I didn't know if he felt deep down regret for the way our family had turned out, but he never tried to convince me to come back. He respected my decision, and that was enough. But most of all, I was grateful that I was able to keep in touch with the children. As Nicole, Chris, and Alex grew up, they began to see for themselves who their parents really were. Nicole left home at 18, saying she didn't want to live under her mother's control, and moved in with me. I saw in her a reflection of myself, the same struggle for independence, the same thirst to be heard, and I did everything to help her feel safe. Chris and Alex were also gradually moving away from their parents. Chris went to college and tried to come home as little as possible. Alex found any excuse to spend more time with friends. They couldn't understand the depth of what had happened between me and their parents, but they felt that something was wrong, and their trust in the family was gradually fading. That wasn't my goal. I didn't want them to hate their parents. I just didn't want them to become the same. 10 years later, I was living a life I could never have dreamed of. I built a successful career, did what I loved, traveled, wrote, surrounded myself with people I chose, and not those with whom I had blood ties. I had a house filled with light and laughter, a husband who respected me and never tried to put me in a box, the daughter I raised not in fear of judgment, but in the freedom to be myself. I looked at her, at this little life we had created, and I knew she would never feel obligated to me. She will never grow up in an atmosphere of guilt and debt. She'll never hear from me. You have to. Sometimes the past caught up with me. I could wake up in the middle of the night, remember the Christmas holidays when I was 10, 15, 20 years old, remember how I ran around the house, calming the children while the adults were having fun, remember how my mother looked at me reproachfully if I ever allowed myself to refuse. But every time I said to myself, "You made the right choice." I discussed this with my therapist, trying to figure out why I'm still sometimes drawn to places where I no longer belong. "It's natural," he said one day. "You didn't just break up with them. You've lost your family. You've robbed yourself of something that should have been the most reliable thing in the world. But sometimes you have to leave to save yourself." I thought about his words and finally said, "There is no place in my life for those who treated me like I should, and maybe it seems cruel, but it was necessary." He nodded. "And you don't regret it?" I smiled. "No." I walked down the street holding my daughter's hand while the evening city was immersed in the soft light of the lanterns. Christmas carols could be heard in the distance. People were laughing, carrying bags of gifts. The snow was crunching underfoot, and I felt an amazing calmness. I wasn't afraid of December anymore. I was no longer waiting for a call demanding to return. I didn't feel guilty anymore. I was free.